lesson in the Art of Wedding Photography course. Well, first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Caroline Callahan and I will be your educator for the duration of this course. And I have developed this course due to my many years of experience as a commercial photographer, and I've specialised in both portraiture as well as wedding photography. But before we start today's lesson, I want to outline firstly what you will be learning today, but also what we will be covering in all 8 lessons of the course. Well, lesson 1 will start by taking a look at different wedding photography styles. Now, hopefully this will give you a little bit of inspiration, but may also give you a good indicator of what style you are drawn to. Now, certainly starting off, it can be quite hard to settle on a style, but obviously the more you photograph, the more you will see a style emerge. So don't worry if you don't know at first. Next up, we'll take a quick look at the many different ways to get yourself started within the photography industry, including some ways on how to promote your business or market yourself as a photographer. And then once we've covered all of these, we'll start by looking at some of the essential photography equipment you might need along with you on any wedding day. Before we start all of that though, I do want to give you a brief outline of the entire course so you know what to expect throughout. So lesson 1, as I said, is essentially all about how to get started. From lesson 2, we then take an in-depth look at all the pre-wedding organisation or wedding planning that you as a photographer should really be doing. From lesson 3, we start breaking the day down and looking at your shot list. So this is where we're really going to get stuck in and start at the beginning of the day and look at many of those essential shots of the morning, as well as then the detail shots you should be getting throughout the day. In lesson 4, we continue with our breakdown of the shots by looking at the all-important ceremony shots and of course the shots you should be taking of the wedding couple together. Then in lesson 5, we're going to start looking at how you can approach all the group shots. So from the entire group shot down to the family groups and then of course the bridal party photographs. And we'll look at plenty of technical considerations as well as some setups and posing and plenty of practical tips. Lesson 6, we're going to look at what I think is a really important, but to be honest, a very underrated aspect of the day, and that's the candid shots and the evening shots. And I really think the candid shots in particular, they're really important for telling the story of the day and creating atmosphere in your wedding shots and wedding albums. But I do feel a lot of photographers underestimate how much these shots are loved by the couple. And once we round up all the shots of the day, we will then in lesson 7 look at some of the post-production that you can be doing to these images. So firstly, we'll talk about a few processes that will help streamline your workflow and help you only show the best of your work, which I do think is incredibly important for any photographer, but especially essential for wedding photographers who potentially shoot thousands of images in one day. And finally, we're going to look at a number of different presentation options that you can offer the wedding couples. So remember, you have worked incredibly hard to create all of these beautiful images. You now want to be able to show them off in the best possible way. So look, I really hope that all sounds quite exciting and of great interest to you. They are quite fun lessons, absolutely jam-packed with a lot of different ideas and a lot of inspiration for your wedding photography. For now, let me just say very quickly that Shaw Academy does, like any other self-respecting entity, have our very own Facebook and Twitter pages. So you can, of course, follow us on either of these to stay up to date with any new courses becoming available, even just to see the work of any other photography students. And of course, we really do appreciate any kind of feedback on this course. So do jump on, let us know how you got on, if you've enjoyed the course or have any kind of feedback about it. I always think it's really, really great to understand why we are learning what we are. So for now, I'd like to say why we would learn about wedding photography at all. And I really believe it can just, it can simply give you a better understanding of how all of this fits into your photography education. So what you may know already and what you will need to learn in the future. And honestly, I do not care if you've been shooting weddings for years or if you're just starting out. There is always something new to learn, especially in an industry like this with such competition and changing styles and changing expectations from your clients. But I do think it's probably pretty safe to say wedding photography is one of the busiest forms of commercial photography. No matter where you live, what culture you've been brought up in, whether or not your country's going through an economic boom or bust, people always want to get married and they do want to have it documented. And even though every second person at their wedding might have a camera, everybody does appreciate a wedding photographer who understands what they're doing, knows what to expect, and can give clear instructions and advice on what needs to be done. And that leads us to professionalism. So if you can turn up to what can be a very hectic day, be professional, be confident, you will absolutely become their favorite person of the day. And this will naturally lead to more recommendations, which is going to lead to more business for you. But like anything, knowledge builds confidence. So if you're anyway unsure of what your role needs to be or what is going to happen next, how to deal with a particular situation, you can very easily begin to lose your confidence. But this course is going to give you some fantastic tips that can help you anticipate the day and help you figure out how you want to approach it all. But it's also going to give you quite a few tips on how to get yourself started. So in terms of experience, your portfolio, and of course promoting yourself as well. But all of this is going to help ensure that your day runs smoothly, or at least as much as that is possible on any wedding day, okay? And again, look, if the day does run smoothly, you're going to be getting all the shots you want, and more importantly, all the shots that the couple will want, and then you're going to have an incredibly happy couple. Okay, so let's start talking about wedding styles, okay? So wedding photography styles. And I really believe this will help you identify a signature look or a predominant style that you do like and can use to make your work stand out above all the competition, okay? I really believe if you create something that you love, your clients are much more likely to love them too. And as Ansel Adams has said, you don't take a photograph, you make it, okay? And guys, if you can identify what your signature look is, that is going to make your portfolio of work really, really stand out above all the rest. And I do want you to have a think about what is your favorite style of photography. So constantly be thinking about what styles you are drawn to and maybe even what styles you are aware of. You always need to keep yourself up to date with this. But all right, I'm going to start by showing you a few different styles, and this will give you an idea of some of the trends that are out there and hopefully a little bit of inspiration for developing your own style. Now guys, like anything, styles can overlap, they can interchange. A lot of photographers will have a predominant style, but they'll also be incorporating other styles into any wedding day. And honestly, sometimes your style can even be influenced by the couples themselves or even just the day that is in it. So we'll start by looking at some examples of a more formal, classic style of wedding photography. Then we'll move on and we'll look at candid photography, which is incredibly popular these days. We'll also look at photojournalism styles, again another incredibly popular one. But I really believe as wedding photographers, there's always going to be a romantic element to some of the images. And sometimes even a dramatic style could creep in there as well. So we'll look at examples of those too. And lastly, something I'm seeing more and more of is a quirky style of photography. Okay, so here's an example of a more formal style of wedding photography. And formal, it really just refers to the fact that this image has been set up. So, the photographer didn't just stumble across the group standing perfectly together like this. So, he purposely set them up this way, and he would have given guidance on poses. You can see the girls are all holding their hands the same way, so are the guys. Everybody's smiling, kind of looking at the camera. It's all pretty kind of standard stuff. Now it is pretty rare that there won't be an element of this in your day, particularly for the group shots. People do expect to see group shots somewhat like this. They clearly want to be able to see everybody looking at the camera, showing off their outfits, and everybody just generally looking their best. And in this case, sometimes it's nearly a document of who was there with them on the day. Now you can, of course, start getting quite creative in terms of the setup once you do know you have a safe shot done first. And we will, of course, we'll look at how to set up these type of group shots in lesson 5. So we'll give you quite a lot of ideas and tips and poses on this. Now, one thing I would like to point out about this photograph, I don't think there's a little bit of a tilt going on in the background, which I don't think is ideal. I think it'd look a little bit nicer if the crop was readjusted to adjust for that tilt and straighten it out. So do always keep an eye on something like that. But look, just another quick example with the couple. So again, you can see it's quite a formal example. It's obviously been set up as the cutting of the cake shot normally would be. And you can see the bride's hand, it's arranged perfectly so we can see her ring. The two of them are quite smiley, they're quite happy, and we can see them perfectly as well as seeing the cake quite well as well. So it is ticking a lot of boxes. Now, in contrast to that more formal classic style, nowadays you'll see a huge amount of candid shots. And this has certainly come out of the digital revolution, so being able to shoot potentially an unlimited amount of images. So, you're not restricted to just 36 images on a roll of film. So this does absolutely enable you to capture all the little moments in between the big moments. And very often these are actually the images that your couple will be crying all those happy tears when they're looking at your shots of the day. But it's also going to allow you to inject an awful lot of humour as well as emotions into your image. And honestly, you do want the couple to be reliving all these emotions of the day when they're looking back at your photographs. I really think this is what makes wedding photography so valuable. And as a photographer, you will be looking for those funny little moments that really the majority of people will actually miss. Now again, as these are usually catching moments just as they happen, typically there's very little setting up for the candid shots, though to be honest, being able to anticipate moments can really, really pay off. So certainly it pays to be quite observant throughout the whole day. But here's I think quite a sweet example of a good journalistic style of wedding photography. And now I suppose when you're thinking of a journalistic style of photography, really you're just thinking of a style where the photographer is just documenting the day. So the photographer is not setting up the shots, but rather is capturing all the little moments that the couple may not even be part of. So quite similar to candid photography. And remember, there is a huge amount of stuff that the couple don't get to see happening, so they can really love seeing these shots for that reason. But another really important element of photojournalistic styles is very much the visual element. So very often you will notice in a more photojournalistic style, typically the photographer isn't using any flash photography. Black and white images are very, very common. Now, they could be shot in a couple of different ways. They might be shot using a long lens or a telephoto lens, or the photographer could be using a wide angle lens. And the idea of all of this is that it helps the photographer be invisible, particularly with a telephoto lens. So, people, they're not even going to be aware that the photographer is nearby or even photographing them. And this all really, really helps when you're trying to capture the real emotions and moments as they happen. Now, as a result, if you're not using any flash photography, your images will probably have a lot more shadows. Remember, no fill flash. Again, as a lot of moments will be indoors with poor lighting, very often you might end up using quite a high ISO, and that's going to result in this quite grainy look that we're actually seeing in this particular image. Now, it's not a good or a bad thing, but it definitely is an element of the style, and it gives a certain look. But going back to the lenses, if you're using a long lens or a telephoto lens, that means you can actually be a little bit away from the people, and that's going to help you be invisible. They're not really going to notice you if you're not too close up to them. Now, if you go the opposite way and use a wide-angle lens, it means if you're standing a little bit back, you can get much more of the entire scene into the images, which again is absolute classic photojournalism. And certainly a very, very common question when I'm talking about this is always, what is the difference with candid and photojournalistic styles? And to be honest, there's not actually a lot for me, but it is nearly down to the visuals. So candid photography, it would usually still be quite colourful. Very often they could incorporate flash in contrast to photojournalism, where typically flash would be avoided. However, to be honest, I actually think it's nearly the approach to how the images are taken. So with candid shots, you can, as a photographer, still very much be involved in the scene. So people may still be engaging and talking to you as a photographer, whereas as discussed, a photojournalist will nearly be trying to be invisible and not interfering with what's happening at all. But we'll move on, and one thing I'd absolutely say to you all, there is no day more romantic than a wedding day. So I really think you'd be hard-pressed not to incorporate or capture this in your images. Now, you may find you're using softer lighting, or giving the couple a little bit more space to be themselves and just help emphasize the mood. And again, in the case of this particular photograph, this was shot late in the evening, so it's just that hour before sunset, and you can see the sun is really low in the sky, and it really gives off this beautiful warm glow. And we're getting that flare between the couple because we're photographing directly into the sun. Now, posing will definitely add to this as well. So very often these more romantic style images will be much more about the couple. So they're probably going to be looking at each other, maybe kissing or a gentle embrace, rather than looking at the camera or standing side by side like in the more formal shots. But in direct contrast to that kind of romantic feel is this dramatic style. So very often this is actually utilising quite a dramatic landscape or a dramatic setting. In this particular example, we can see a very dramatic dark sky in the background. The posing's much more stylized, almost has a fashion feel to it. And the bride and the groom, they're looking off into the distance, looking quite confident. Again, the angle is looking up, which is just adding to that dramatic feel. And there's definitely a little pop of light on the couple here. So it's making them stand out from the background. Now, it's definitely a harsher, more dramatic lighting in comparison to the softer lighting of the romantic image. And finally, let's look at quirky photographs, okay? So this one, definitely a style that we're seeing more and more of nowadays. And this can really lend itself to showing off the couples or the group's personalities and, again, maybe even using any props that they may want to include. And honestly, you need to remember people are personally tailoring their weddings more and more these days. So this is just something that you need to capture and show off. Now, in this particular example, the photographers decided to go for quite a different viewpoint. So, in this case, we're not even seeing their faces. It's just kind of emphasizing the quirkiness of their shot. They've obviously, put a lot of planning into making sure they all have different colored socks. So it's just showing off the personality and the vibrancy of this particular group of groomsmen. Again, another example of a quirky shot, and again, it's just using props that the couple have decided to use and incorporate into their wedding day. And honestly, don't be afraid to have a few shots where you can't see the couple's face. You should have plenty of other shots where you can clearly see them. So this is just a fun example of something a little bit different. But okay, hopefully this is going to give you an idea of some of the different styles that are out there. Honestly, at this stage, don't worry if you feel you haven't developed your own style just yet. It really, really only happens with experience. So the more you photograph, the more this will develop. And honestly, even the most experienced photographers will still try out new stuff, and they might incorporate some of the newest trends into their shot list, and they will absolutely be influenced by their clients. But look, hopefully after seeing all of that, you do have a favourite style, and maybe you can push towards having that as a predominant style in your portfolio. I really do encourage you to regularly look at different styles of photography. Be aware of those latest trends, and this will keep your portfolio quite fresh, and it'll help you have an understanding of what potential clients will be looking for. Okay, well, let's move on and take a quick look at some of the ways to get yourself started within the photography industry. So I've talked to quite a lot of students that have always said to me they love the idea of doing wedding photography, but they just don't know where to get started. And honestly, I would say to you, there is a number of different ways to start. And quite frankly, I'd actually say there's a few things you should be trying to do at the one time. But the first thing I'd like to say to you is you are well on your way to getting started. So just by taking this course, you've already started the process of learning about wedding photography and upskilling your photography skills. And certainly I would say to you, online education is absolutely one of the easiest ways to kickstart your education, simply because it just does tend to be more convenient for a lot of people to learn this way. Now, generally speaking as well, it's nearly always a lot better value for money than some of the more conventional ways to educate yourself. But I would always say to you, you can, of course, always be on the lookout for a lot of local courses as well. There's absolutely no reason why you can't be trying out a few different ways to educate yourself. From here on in, though, you do need to think of a few other options. So you need to start thinking like a customer. If they wanted to hire you as a wedding photographer, what do you think they're going to want to see from you? I want you guys to think about this for a moment. What would a potential client like to know or see from you? And honestly, I think that the most important things they're going to ask of you is, what experience do you have? And they're also going to want to see examples of photographs you have taken, okay? But unfortunately, it's a bit of a catch-22. So, how do you get experience and how do you get images to start you off, just to get those first few bookings? And honestly, I do think there is a few different things you can do. And probably one of the best options to start off will be to work as a second shooter or an assistant photographer along with a more experienced photographer from your local area. Now, you will definitely need to decide for yourself how many weddings you would like to do this way. It's definitely going to depend on your own learning abilities and probably just as importantly, your own confidence levels. But I think it can be a fantastic way for you to get experience without all the pressure being on you. But it's also a great way to see the different approaches that photographers can take. However, if you have worked with a few photographers, you should also actually see a lot of similarities in what they do too. So either way, it's an absolutely amazing learning experience. But it's very, very important to understand what do they expect from you on the wedding day. They might be happy to let you take on some of their shot list, or they may simply want you to look after their photography equipment. So you need to be very, very clear from the beginning so you can actually decide if it is beneficial to you or not. It will definitely depend on your own experience. Equally, it's very important to be very clear about what you expect from working with them. You know, if you're only doing this to get images that you can use in your own portfolio, you'll need to be very, very clear about this. A lot of photographers will not be okay with you using images of their clients. Now, others could be absolutely fine with you using them in a printed portfolio, but maybe not an online gallery or on social media. So be very clear and stick to what you agree. Next, let's have a little bit of a talk about creating a portfolio. So, you know, you may have a bit of experience in weddings with other photographers, or you could have plenty of experience doing portraiture or maybe event photography, but you will still need a portfolio specific to wedding photography. Now, again, there's a number of ways to approach this. First up, I would say to you, start bringing your camera along to any family or friends' weddings. Now, you may not be the official photographer, but I'm sure they're going to be happy enough for you to take plenty of images on the day and probably fine with you using those photographs for your own portfolio. Now, you can certainly try and get a few candid shots, but hopefully you will be able to steal the couple away for a few setup shots, or at least capture a few shots during the ceremony. Now, equally, if you know of anybody who cannot afford a professional photographer, maybe you can come to some sort of an agreement with them. And again, if you're doing this, I'd still be very, very clear about what they expect of you and what you are happy to do or not. Now, also, if you expect any kind of a payment or expenses to be covered, be very clear about this from the beginning. But if you do any of this, it's not only going to help you get images for your portfolio, but it is actually helping you gain experience as well. Now, a second option is to ask a friend with a wedding dress to do a shoot for you. So a lot of people would be absolutely delighted with the opportunity to get into their dress again. So do ask around. And the fantastic thing about this is that they might actually be more adventurous now that the wedding is over and they're not so concerned about the dress being ruined. And another great way to get practicing is by doing a shoot with a hired model. So, I mean, you can decide for yourself how much you're willing to spend on this, but in both cases, it can be absolutely well worthwhile getting a professional to do hair and makeup just to give it a real wedding look. Now, in the case of hiring a model, you might need to look out for second-hand stores that are selling off wedding dresses cheap, or even if you just look at a lot of the modern weddings, you will actually notice a lot of brides, they're not going for the full wedding gowns. A lot of brides are buying their wedding dresses from high street stores, so there's absolutely no reason why you couldn't style quite a modern wedding in this way yourself if you are willing to spend a little bit of money on this. However, I'd actually say to you, it'd be even better if you could use this mock shoot as a way to network with some local wedding suppliers. So anybody from dressmakers, hairstylists, makeup artists, florists, anybody at all that you can think of that will be involved in weddings. If you are happy to offer them the usage of your images in exchange for their services on a day like this, you'll probably find there'll be a lot of small local suppliers that'll be very, very happy to get in on this. But don't forget, look, whatever way you are doing this, whether it's a mock shoot with a friend or a hired model, the idea is that you practice poses, different lighting techniques, and basically just train your eye to look for the best photo opportunities. And you know, it's not just about getting images for your portfolio, although obviously the bigger the variation you get, the better. But you need to use it as experience in posing and practicing with your equipment as well. Now, we also need to talk a little bit about promoting yourself and helping you get those first few wedding bookings. So, I mean, what I would say, an awful lot of photographers, they do nearly seem to stumble into wedding photography. And honestly, I promise you, if you haven't shot a wedding yet, I would say if your friends and your family or your work colleagues, if they know you have a big interest in photography, I promise you they will start coming to you and asking you to photograph either their weddings or other different family occasions like christenings, birthdays, anniversaries, or any other kind of family or community or charity events. And all of these, to be honest, can be a great way for you to be introduced to wedding and commercial photography. Now, in saying that, if you don't want to wait for them to actually come and ask you, you can still use them to spread the word, okay? And I really believe word of mouth is a fantastic way to get yourself started. So tell everybody, family, friends, work colleagues, to keep you in mind if any of their friends or work colleagues are getting married, or even if they just want an occasion photographed. Now, it can certainly take a bit of time for the actual weddings to come in, but in the meantime, any kind of social events or charity events can be a great way to get a little bit of practice. But also, it's a great way to have people seeing you work as a photographer. So do try and have business cards ready to hand out to people if they start asking you about what you do. But once you do get your first weddings, use those clients to then spread the word. Now, you can always be offering them a little extra or a bit of a gift for any referrals that come to you. So it could be something very simple like a free 8x10 framed image from the wedding day, just as a little thank you for any of their referrals that actually come and book you. And I know lots of photographers, and they all expect to get at least 2 or 3 more bookings to come from any one wedding. And honestly, when you think about how many people are there on any wedding day, they actually get to see how you work, how you treat the wedding couple, and then if they hear the couple talk really positively about you and how much they love their images, and they then go and see those images on social media, it is an absolutely huge advertisement for you. But look, it definitely does take time to get these bookings to come in. So you do have to be patient and thinking about other ways to get a few weddings under your belt in the meantime. So look, we've kind of touched on this when we were talking about doing mock shoots, but I want to talk a little bit about the benefits of networking with your local suppliers. And basically, if you can get in touch with any local suppliers that are in the wedding industry, if you can create good relationships with them and have them at a point where they're happy to recommend you, you can get an awful lot of business from this. Remember, at all stages, you are representing yourself as a brand or a business. So right at the start, if you're working with another photographer, if you build good enough relationships with them, they might be quite happy to recommend you if they're booked on a wedding day and have a second or third client coming to them for bookings. But any couple that are organising any wedding, they're going to be in touch with a number of suppliers. Anybody from dressmakers, florists, car hire places, DJs, bands, hotels, and a wedding officiant, okay? So honestly, networking could potentially take up an awful lot of your time. And it certainly is really great to do, but I do find it's very important to really, really spend the most time on those that are more likely to actually be beneficial to you. So, you have to think again of the process that any wedding couple will go through. The first thing they're going to organise is a church or a town hall, wherever they have to get married, including then the wedding officiant and a wedding venue for their reception. From here on in, they can start looking into any number of other suppliers. But generally, I have found that next, they're going to start looking at wedding photographers, videographers, maybe the band or the DJ, and maybe a wedding dressmaker. After those, they'll start looking at flowers, cake, car hire, etc., etc., okay? And the reason I'm saying this, I'm sure you can guess, is because there's absolutely no point in you spending lots and lots of time and money networking with your local florist, say, if the wedding couple have already booked their wedding photographer by the time they're coming around to talk to a florist. And hopefully that makes sense, guys, because I think it's very, very important to be very, very practical about this and really put your time and energy into the people that are most important to you. Now, if you already have a few weddings booked, make sure to try and talk to as many suppliers on the wedding day as possible. Now, obviously, without compromising your photographs. That is absolutely your number one priority at all times, okay? But look, if you have any kind of quiet times or you get talking to any of the other suppliers, try and maybe get their contact details. And that way, if you have a good photograph of them or their products on the day, you can send it on to them afterwards. So very quick and very easy for you to stand out to them, and therefore making sure that you're going to be remembered if people happen to ask, do they know of a good wedding photographer? Now, equally, you can offer your services to photograph their products another day. You'd absolutely have to decide for yourself now how valuable their recommendations are. So you can decide how good of a deal that you might give them or how much of your time they are worth. But I would say somebody like a busy hotel, for example, will be worth an awful lot of time. I mean, if you can get in on a hotel's wedding suppliers list, that is absolute gold to you. It's an incredible one to get, okay? Now, it can certainly be very, very hard to do, so you will find a lot of established hotels, they'll already have a well-established list of suppliers that they don't want to rock the boat with. However, if you're thinking of doing a mock wedding shoot for your portfolio, well then, why not get in touch with a hotel and just see, will they let you use their grounds for photographs? And obviously you kind of just offer that they can use any images they like for their own advertising. Now, equally, if you start to notice a local restaurant that's trying to break into the wedding market, sometimes it can be great to get in with these before they are established. But you can literally just simply send on images for them to use on their websites, or you could go as far as offering to design a wedding album for them, okay? And basically, if you do that for a hotel, that's an amazing tool for them to sell their venue to potential wedding clients. So if you do this and you have your name on it and your wedding images in there, wedding clients will see that, and they'll see that the hotel obviously trusts you and rate your photography enough for them to be showing your work. But look, all of this absolutely requires your judgment on how much time or a money investment that you want to put into it. You really, really have to be shrewd deciding who are the suppliers of most value to you. Okay, so guys, let's talk a little bit about the beast that is online marketing, okay? Now, I'm literally only going to touch on this one because we do have a lot of amazing courses that cover this quite extensively. We have a digital marketing course and a social media course as well, okay? So you can take a look at those after this one. But what I would absolutely say to you is that for any business, you need to have an online presence, and you can just build this up slowly, okay? I don't think there's any point setting up accounts in every single social media available if you don't have the time to maintain it properly. But look, I just want to talk about a few that I think as photographers are particularly worthwhile. Now, without a doubt, I would say Facebook is one of the biggest social media platforms. So at this stage, it has 1 billion users, and that's a huge resource of potential customers to be reaching out to. Now, Instagram and Pinterest, they're also other brilliant social media outlets, but they're absolutely perfect for visual industries. But they're also very, very popular resources with wedding couples who are looking for ideas for their weddings, and very popular with 20 to 30 somethings, okay? So your typical kind of average wedding ages. However, one thing I would say to you, when using any of these to promote your business, please make sure to set up business accounts, okay? You could be adding your business-related posts to your personal page as well, but I just think if you really want to be taken seriously as a business, it's very important not to have a crossover between your personal accounts and your business accounts. Now, it's certainly well worthwhile putting a bit of time into setting your profiles up, so make sure to have professional images and obviously a little bit about your business. And if you are going to bother setting these up, make sure to put aside some time throughout the week to maintain these. Constantly be adding new content and replying to customers or potential customers who might contact you. And it's certainly well worth looking at dedicated wedding organizing websites such as onefabday.com or Weddings Online. I think hitch.co.uk seems to be more popular in the UK, or the not.com quite popular in the US, okay? So they're absolutely fantastic websites for targeting wedding couples, okay? It's where they go to look for information about wedding suppliers. But it's very, very important for you to constantly reassess where wedding couples are looking for information about weddings and target these places. However, I would say to you, all of these social media sites should be driving traffic to your very own websites. A majority of photographers, I think at this stage, do still have their own dedicated websites. I just think it's a great way to showcase the best of your photography work. Tell clients a little bit about you and the services that you offer. And even you can be offering them an online gallery. It could be a private gallery so they can see their wedding photographs once they are ready. Now, in all honesty, it's probably not going to be their first point of contact that your clients are going to have of your work. You'd absolutely have to spend a huge amount of money to get it high in the rankings of search optimization sites like Google. But personally, I think they're still very, very valuable, a very valuable resource for any photographer to have. Now, as I said, it should really be showcasing the best of your work. Don't be tempted to just throw up all the shots from one wedding unless it is a particularly amazing wedding, okay? But just choose only the best. And if you don't have many weddings under your belt yet, well then maybe go back to what we talked about earlier about doing mock shoots with a hired model or even with a friend. And if your business is growing and you find you're shooting more and more weddings, try and put aside your favorite shots from each wedding as you edit them, and then every so often you update your website with new images. And remember, if you have your own website, do think of it as it's essentially your online portfolio. So it's really, really important to have it up to date with your best work. Don't sell yourself short by having early work that just isn't as good as what you are doing once you have a bit more experience. Now, you could literally go about creating your own website. You can literally design one yourself using software like Dreamweaver or Adobe Muse. But there is a number of web building websites out there, and they offer different templates and different features for all kinds of budgets. So it's well worthwhile putting a bit of research into this. You can certainly get some very basic ones for free, but I always believe if you have the funds, it's absolutely worthwhile investing some money into this. Now, I'm not affiliated with any of these guys, but basically a list of some of the more popular site building providers. We've got Wix.com, WordPress, Blue Domain, eHost, Site Builder, Sitey. There's quite a lot that I've left out. There's obviously GoDaddy and quite a lot more out there as well. Okay, so put a bit of research into this, absolutely. But look, the idea with all of these that they will provide a template which you can customize, and majority of them will also be quite happy for you to offer you hosting to go alongside your website. So again, really, really worthwhile putting a bit of research into the different options that are available. Now, obviously, if you have an even bigger budget and prefer to get one completely custom made, you can, of course, get in touch with any local web designers. Just make sure to be very, very clear about what kind of follow-up support is included. Now, everything I've talked about so far, they're obviously lower cost ways to break into weddings. If you do have a nice big budget to spend on advertising, then that opens up an awful lot of other options for you. So anything like wedding fairs, magazine advertising, online target ads, Facebook target ads as well. But for the moment, we're just going to move on, but certainly heaps and heaps of options if you do have a bigger budget. Many students, they always ask, what photography equipment should I have? And what I would absolutely say to each and every one of you is that every photographer will have something different that they absolutely consider vital, and they swear they won't shoot a wedding without, okay? But what I will say to you all is that there is a number of factors to consider when deciding on your equipment. The number one is absolutely your budget, okay? Unfortunately, as much as we all want to have the best of the best, it does all cost quite a lot of money. So maybe you just build up your gear as your photography business grows. What are you happy to carry around all day, okay? Honestly, equipment is heavy, and often paring it down to the basics that you know you're going to use an awful lot is best. You also don't want to be messing around too much, changing your camera or your lenses every second shot, okay? And look, the guy the guy that I have on screen I think is a little bit excessive, but look, I thought he was quite funny. I certainly don't think you need any knee pads when you're going out photographing weddings. Basically pare it down to the basics that you know you're really, really going to use often, and I really think it's the best method personally anyway. But as well, how advanced are your technical skills? I really believe there's no point of getting loads and loads of new equipment if you haven't actually got to grips with your basic camera functions, okay? Now, obviously, the more and more you photograph, the more comfortable you will become with your equipment. So you might start feeling more confident about adding more to your standard kit. But I really believe just add slowly and make sure you know your kit well and you are getting the most out of your photography equipment. I know too many people that invest so much into their equipment when they just don't even know how to use it properly, and the same problems happen even though they've upgraded their cameras. But okay, look, without a doubt, I would say at this stage, most photographers these days, professional photographers anyway, they will have a decent quality DSLR, okay? However, if you are using a bridge camera, often these can actually be more than enough to cover all of your needs. Now, they usually have all the manual functions that you should be using. They also generally have a decent kind of zoom range, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. But I do want you to consider the limitations. So, does it have RAW functions? How big will the image files be? And what is the actual quality of the lens? Now, I do think with a full DSLR camera, you will have less of these limitations. Next to consider is what lenses. Now, like I said, you really don't want to be changing your lenses or your cameras every 2 minutes. So for that reason, I personally love to have a good quality lens with a good range of focal lengths. I think that's absolutely ideal. So something like a 24mm to 70mm zoom lens is absolutely fantastic. So this will give you basically a wide angle with the 24mm, but then when you can zoom into 70mm, it's quite a decent zoom capacity. So with a lens like that, it's going to allow you to capture like a wide angle shot of the wedding venue, but then you can also zoom in and get a beautiful kind of close-up portrait of the bride or of the groom without changing your lens. Now, if you really want to push it and have better zoom capacity, something like a 70 to 200mm lens is a fantastic piece of equipment to have in your kit. I really think a good telephoto lens is going to give you the ability to move away from your subject, and that's going to help you get some of those more natural shots. However, it is also a beautiful portrait lens. So you will really find the images that you take with a telephoto lens, they're a lot more flattering than wide angle lenses. Now, a lot of other photographers, they will choose to go for a fixed lens. So something like a 50mm, that nifty 50 lens, or even an 85mm lens. And there is a couple of benefits, and I think when the main ones, the biggest benefit I think is that with these you typically will have quite a wide aperture option. So with these lenses you could have an option of an f1.4 aperture, which is really going to knock the background completely out of focus, allowing you to achieve that really shallow depth of field look. But it will also allow you to get the shots in low light situations. Like f1.4 is going to let in a lot of light, so it will help you kind of in those darker situations, and particularly if you don't want to be using any flash photography. Now, very often the quality of the glass can be really, really beautiful in these. It can be quite high, the quality, and they can be a lot better, and that can help result in better shots. But you really do have to consider, is it a good enough trade-off to replace a good zoom lens, okay? Is it a good enough benefit to constantly be changing your lens for? But honestly, I really believe lens choices can be influenced by the style of photography that you want to use. So when I showed you the styles earlier on, if you felt the photojournalistic style was your favorite and what you'll probably do most of, you might find that a 24mm to 70mm lens will be absolutely fine. Now you might be happy to go with a 24mm to 105mm lens if you want to have that little bit of extra zoom capacity, but typically with those you might only have an option of an f4 aperture, so always worth taking that into consideration as well. However, if you find you were more attracted to those more stylized, maybe the more romantic style images, you might want to add that 70 to 200mm lens, and that really allows you to move away from the people you're photographing. It allows them to feel much more comfortable and be themselves that little bit more. So if you like those images more so, that might be a lens for you to add to your kit. Now next up is flash. Now, personally, I absolutely consider flash vital. Now as much as I'm happy to use natural light as often as possible, sometimes you just have to deal with very low light situations, and having flash can enable you to still shoot at these times. Now secondly, flash can also be incredibly creative if you're using it in the right way and if you really learn how to use it well. Again, your style will absolutely help you decide if this is needed or not, okay? Now, I'm not going to be going into too much technical detail on flash in this course because myself and William, we do cover this in the UPP course, the Ultimate Photography course. So if you're a member with us, you can jump onto that and learn how to use flash quite well. But I want to give you an example of when you might use flash. So if you think back to the example of the dramatic image I showed earlier, the couple that were in the field, the really dark sky that was behind them, I mentioned there was a pop of light on them, and that would come from a speedlight flash. And that can just give your image that extra illumination that adds to the drama. But in that case, it meant the photographer could expose for the sky and use fill-in light on the couple with his flash. So we're going to see plenty of examples of different shots using fill flash throughout this course. And so hopefully by the end of the course, you'll be able to decide whether or not you like the look and if it is something that you want to use. A lot of people will also ask me, do they need studio lighting in their kit? Again, I would absolutely say to you, this will depend on your style of photography. But possibly, it's also going to be where are you likely to be photographing. So, for all of you that are lucky enough to be photographing weddings in the likes of Australia, California, South Africa, Middle East, you guys can probably rely on the sun and the weather an awful lot more than we can here in the UK and Ireland, okay? In Ireland, it's very common to have quite a lot of rain, so we have to do shoots indoors. In the winter, it can be quite dark. It gets dark by 4 p.m. Or we could even just be photographing in quite dark castles or buildings that just have very, very low light. So in those cases, I've used studio lighting quite a bit. Now, I'd probably only use them for maybe the formal shots with maybe the family photographs. I certainly don't set up studio lighting for the ceremony. I think it's just way, way too intrusive. as well as not being very flexible. You can't move around too much with studio lighting. But one thing I'll absolutely say to you all is wait until you're at a certain stage with your photography skills before you add studio lighting to your kit. I don't think it's essential, and certainly if you're only getting to grips with the basics, it might just be too much for the moment. Now again, we do have a studio lighting lesson on the UPP course, the Ultimate Photography course, so if you are eager to learn about this, you can jump on there. Now another thing that you might like to have is reflectors. I know a lot of photographers absolutely love these and will always bring them with them. And the idea with reflectors, literally as it sounds, they reflect available light back onto your subject. So it can really help eliminate some unflattering shadows from your subjects, much like full flash will do, but it is a nice way of getting a little bit more light without using flash photography. Now they are available in a number of different colours, and they simply give you the option of whether or not you want to reflect a cooler light, maybe with a silver reflector for example, or if you prefer a warmer tone, you might use a gold reflector instead. Now they are quite light and they're quite portable, but I really have to warn you, I've seen lots of people just struggling to fold these up. So certainly do practice with that well before you bring them out on a wedding day. Now there is still another few kind of little but very important pieces of equipment that you need to make sure to have, okay? So one thing is absolutely spare cards, and people are always asking me how many cards should they bring along with them on the day, and this is one you will need to work out for yourself. So honestly, with weddings, you could be shooting anything from maybe at least 2 hours coverage. More often than not, it's probably going to be actually 8 hours. It could even be 10, 12, 14 hours that you're photographing for. So I always think it's best to have too many cards rather than get caught out and not have enough. Now all of your cameras are going to be taking images at different sizes, so you know if it's not quite a professional model, it might be smaller images like 8 megapixels, or the more professional kind of models could be taking images that are anything up to 21 megapixels, okay? Now obviously the bigger the images you're taking, the more cards you will need to bring along with you. And honestly, I have found shooting weddings, maybe a short day, I might only take, 600-700 images if I'm only there for a couple of hours. But honestly, usually it's anything up to 2,000, maybe 2,500 images from any one wedding day. So look, have enough cards to cover this. Now obviously if you're using your camera heaps and heaps, you're going to be going through a lot of batteries as well, and this exact same principle applies in this regard. It's much better to have too many batteries than not enough. And if you are using flash, an external speed light, don't forget to have spare batteries for that too. They can really go through your batteries very quickly. Now there is a few other little things that are not necessarily expected, but I think can just really make you stand out as being quite a considerate photographer. And some of those things could be something like having an umbrella or a cloth to bring along with you on the day. So you have to think, if you get caught out in the rain, a bride or a groom, they're going to be incredibly grateful if you can actually offer them an umbrella. Just think, if you're saving the bride's hair from being ruined, you're going to be her absolute hero of the day. Now likewise, if you're asking a bride in a white dress to sit down on random benches or sit down on the grass, you can't always be pretty confident that the dresses are going to remain clean. So if you can just say to them, hold on a minute, I actually have a cloth that you can sit on. Again, it just shows how considerate you are, and you become an absolute superstar in their eyes. Now lastly, one thing I always get asked about is tripods. And again, this is going to be very much down to your own personal style of photography. I very, very rarely use tripods at weddings, okay? And my reason for that is because I like to be quite flexible and I like to be able to move around quite quickly and without, I actually think I try to keep my equipment down to a minimum. But secondly, keep in mind why you're using a tripod. If you're using a tripod so you can use really slow shutter speeds, remember at weddings you're photographing people, okay? So if you're using a slow shutter speed like 1 second, people move and so you're going to get motion blur from people. So please don't get caught out with that, okay? I've seen way too many photographers do that where they've more experience in landscape photography, so they set their shutter speeds to maybe 1/15 of a second or maybe a whole second, and they're photographing groups of people. People move within that time frame, so you shouldn't be using anything slower than 1/60th of a second, even if you're using a tripod. However, you may later on in the evening be doing some quite creative shots and maybe you do want to pick up a little bit of motion, and if that's the case, by all means use a tripod. Or if you're using quite a long lens, like a 200mm lens, if you're using a shutter speed anything slower than 1/200th of a second, you might find you're picking up a little bit of camera shake. So maybe in those cases you want to set up a tripod, but definitely down to your own style of photography and your own approach to the wedding day. But okay guys, look, there it is. That's our first lesson in the Art of Wedding Photography course. So look, let me do a quick summary for the moment. So tonight we did talk about the different styles of wedding photography. We then moved on and we looked at quite a few different ways that you can get your portfolio kick-started and how to get those first few bookings. From there we talked a little bit about promoting yourself, and we've talked about some of the best photography gear to have. So guys, look, I really hope you've enjoyed the first lesson. I can absolutely say to you, congratulations. You've just laid the foundations of learning about wedding photography, okay? We will, of course, continue to build on this throughout the course, but I will say to you, we absolutely are here to help. So do contact us at any time if you have any questions about the lessons. I'll give you those contact details very shortly. But first of all, let me just show you what we're going to be doing in our next lesson. So guys, in lesson 2, it's going to be all about getting organized, or all your pre-wedding organization. So we will start by looking at a location scouting. Now this is obviously very important. It's quite a big part of your pre-wedding organization. So we're going to discuss the benefits of what you should be doing on a location scouting. Secondly, we're going to take a look at engagement shoots, or a pre-wedding shoot that you can do with your wedding couple. Now, it might not necessarily seem like it fits into all the pre-wedding organisation, but certainly for me, it's about the relationship building with the couple, so I consider it very important. Next up, we'll take a look at all the pre-wedding paperwork and all the communication that you should be having with the couple. Again, vital part of any wedding day shoot that a lot of people just underestimate and don't understand that this is actually part of your role of being a wedding photographer. Then lastly, we're going to look at the benefits of having a second photographer with you. So guys, really hope you move on, you take a look at lesson 2, an awful lot of very important stuff to go through before we start breaking down the wedding shots of the day. Well look guys, let me say a big massive thank you for attending lesson 1. Genuinely hope you've enjoyed the lesson and feel you've learned a lot of stuff from the course. For now, thank you, and I'll see you back for lesson 2.